Meat, we are told, is bad for the planet, so the race is on to produce the next best thing, whether from plants or in a laboratory. Is animal-free meat the future of food? Welcome to Roundtable. Hello from me, David Foster. From the impossible burger made from plants to bacon grown in a laboratory, meat alternatives that look, smell and perhaps taste like the real thing are getting more common. But what will be the impact on the place we call home, our planet, and on our diets?
Global warming is here, and animal agriculture alone is responsible for 18% of harmful emissions. Cows produce 150 billion gallons of methane gas per day, which is 25 to 100 times more destructive than CO2 gases. Global meat consumption has nearly doubled over the past 50 years. We've gone from eating 23 kilograms per person each year to 43 kilograms. More than 6 million animals are killed for human consumption every hour. Experts believe we have two main options if we want to cut rampant meat consumption and move to an alternative: meat from plants or grown in labs. Plant-based meat is made from a mixture of natural ingredients, and one estimate says the market could be worth $85 billion by 2030. The laboratory version is produced by a cultivation of animal cells instead of from slaughtered animals. Several companies are trying to bring it to supermarkets around the world, but so far the cost is a problem. One brand, Future Meat Technologies, is aiming to bring the cost of production of a cell-made steak down to $4.50 per kilo. Could this be the future of food, meat without animals?
Let us start the conversation. We go to Paris. First of all, Benjamina Bollag is their co-founder of Higher Steaks, that's Steaks UK, which is the UK's only lab-grown meat company. With me in the studio, Patrick Holden, organic farmer and founder of the Sustainable Food Trust. We are also joined by Bridget Benelam, a nutritionist from the British Nutritionist Foundation, who worked at the Food Standards Agency before and joined BNF as a nutrition scientist. Maria Chiorando's here, editor of Plant-Based News. Maria, we will come to you in a moment because you are all about plants, you are a vegan, but I want to go to Benjamina first of all to ask you about the lab-grown meat. You write that it could be 6 months before you get your first proper culture. How difficult is it to get to this stage? Because I've been reading about this on and off for years now.
So to get to the stage where we can get a prototype is not the hardest part. The hardest is really the commercialization, and that's going to be more than 6 months. For us, it will be more like 3 to 5 years, and it's difficult. There's a lot of technical, regulatory, consumer acceptance, and engineering challenges that we need to overcome.
Because of all of those challenges, because of the cost, because of the time, you must sincerely believe that this is the answer. What gives you that confidence?
I mean, it's really seeing that people still want real meat, but the movement is still moving towards more sustainability, more healthier solutions, things that don't affect the planet, don't affect our health. But still, people still want real meat. So we don't believe that plant-based can take the whole industry. So there's this place really for both.
A couple of years ago on this programme, we had a chef called Richard McGowan, the first person to ever cook. He says lab-grown meat, and he, at vast expense, we're talking about $300,000 to get to that stage for one burger, but he said it was not tasty. It was a subtle taste. You had to add stuff to it. Do you agree that it's really not going to have much flavour?
Well, if you only have muscle, then yes, it's going to be more similar to, for example, a chicken breast, but the moment you add fat, the moment you add other elements to it, then that's where you really start getting the taste.
Okay.
And obviously, when you're talking about beef, you still need as well the taste of the kind of blood, which is more complex.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Benjamina, and at any time you can interrupt us and say whatever you like. Patrick, as a farmer, very, very expensive, this stuff. doesn't taste of much, takes years to get to this point. What's the point?
Well, to be honest, I'm not surprised. I mean, the reason for this conversation, I think, is a question that everyone is asking now. What should I eat to be healthy and sustainable? And I'm a farmer. I farm in West Wales. I've been farming for over 40 years. And I'm trying to farm with the grain of nature. And in my view, it is possible to produce meat in a sustainable way, whilst at the same time looking after nature and building soil. And I think that the best way forward is for people to differentiate between the meat, which is part of the problem, which is all the industrial meat, which is horrible and bad for welfare.
This is mass-produced, like battery farming, whether it be cows, pigs, chickens, whatever.
Yes, particularly chickens and pigs, but also feedlot beef in America. But actually the grass-fed and mainly grass-fed lamb, beef and dairy cows, which are characteristic of the United Kingdom, are absolutely part of the solution, both environmentally and I believe ethically. I think it is possible to look after animals in a kind way. And this lab-grown meat, which seems to me a synthesis of strange technology, the calf of blood from impregnant cows. I mean, it's not a very nice story behind it, plus lots of additives which are unknown.
Surely it's better just to take the blood, a little bit of blood from one animal than to put a bolt through its head.
Well, killing animals is, of course, part of the present story, but I do believe it's possible to kill animals in an ethical way.
No, I understand that, but you're saying it's a bit difficult to take the blood out of a cow or the fetus. Well, that doesn't kill it. I mean...
No, but if one of the drivers for eating lab-grown meat is welfare, then, of course, there are welfare implications if the tissue culture and the serum comes from animals. And these animals very often, as I understand it, are pregnant cows that go to the abattoir and then the serum is removed from them. So I'm not personally against slaughtering animals in a kind way. I'm simply saying that the lab-grown meat may not be that different.
May not be that ethical either.
Plus, there's another factor.
So if I can...
Yeah. Benjamina, I will come back to you in just a moment. I want to get everybody to say something first of all. So let me ask you, Maria, do you see the problem as being meat per se or ethically reared meat versus industrialised meat?
Well, I understand that what Patrick is doing is very different to the kind of factory farming that I think almost everyone is very upset about and very worried about. However, the issue I think we have is that we have a burgeoning population and farming in the way that you farm, I just don't think would create enough food to feed everyone that we're going to have on the planet within the next few years. For me personally, the issue is that I don't believe there is an ethical way to slaughter an animal. I understand that there are more ethical ways to raise animals, but I don't believe that there's an ethical way to kill someone who does not want to die.
So you think with the number of people eating meat, with the number of people increasing, then we will inevitably go towards a more industrialised form of farming rather than organic. And I will come to you in just a moment because I want to talk benefits or not of this health-wise. But I can see, Benjamina, you're dying to get in. So what is it you wanted to say in reply?
I mean, the first thing I want to say is I agree. I think the big thing that we're trying to replace is factory farming, and really that industrialized and that part that is growing and that will need to feed the world. On top of that, most people have already gone rid of fetal bovine serum, and no one is planning to actually industrialize using it. It's not only a problem of animal welfare or ethics, but also a problem of actually consistency. If you use fetal bovine serum, it's every time you have a different result, you have no consistency in your product. So it's not, and it's horrifically expensive.
Okay, and we will talk later in the programme about exactly how you go about it.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, Bridget, in terms of its goodness or not, have you got any way of telling at the moment, considering this is just effectively experimental?
In terms of lab-grown meat, no, we don't have information currently that's in the public domain on its nutritional content. Now, given that it's coming from animal cells, I'm assuming that it will have some commonalities with meat as it stands, but I also assume that you can manipulate that, and it may be that you can use that for good or for, depending on how you want to change that for bad if you're trying to emulate the meats that people really like. So we know that at the moment we have lots of products, plant-based products, that are trying to emulate products like burgers, for example. And inevitably, when you do that, you have to introduce the kinds of things like fat and salt that give those flavours that make
Animal
it tasty.
fat or not?
Well, currently some of the plant-based products have things like coconut oil added, so to give it the mouthfeel, the texture.
Quite good for you, isn't it?
Well, no, because it's very rich in saturated fat.
Coconut oil is not good for you at all. Okay.
Well, yeah, coconut oil's one of the highest oils in saturated fat. We know that saturated fat has issues. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the healthiness of coconut oils, but I would
good
say...
for your skin.
Perhaps so, but I would think less so when you actually eat it. So I think...
So you've got to be careful about what is added to this. Is that your view?
Yes,
too?
there are products which emulate animal meat, and they are not health food products. If you go out and buy some of the best imitation burgers, it's not a health food. Just like a burger from an animal, it's a treat. It's something you eat now and again. It's not something you eat every day, in my opinion.
A lot of them taste like sawdust. I know that because somebody very close to me eats them.
I can certainly give you some recommendations on better ones, because there's been some amazing innovation in the past few years, and there are really some very good products on the market.
Right, okay. Patrick, what about this suggestion that industrialised farming, factory farming, if you like, is going to happen inevitably because we are a society that is growing and we are a society that is downing more and more meat. The demand is there and there's a bigger population of feed. You can't avoid it.
We can't go on eating the levels of meat that we are currently consuming because it's just going to bust all the planetary boundaries and lead to irreversible climate change. So we definitely have to alter our meat consumption, but we need to differentiate between the meat which is part of the problem, which is all the industrial farming, as you've just been discussing, and the meat which is actually needed to build the soil fertility in sustainable farming systems which need to replace the ones we've got at the moment.
How does that work then?
Well, basically, what we've done in the industrial period of agriculture is not just the livestock that have been intensified, it's also the crops. And we've depleted all the soil carbon to critical levels, and the only way to rebuild it is to return to mixed farming with a system with a crop rotation, which includes a fertility building element, that's grass and clover, and the only way we can turn that into food is to graze it with ruminant animals.
Okay, so just help me with this one, because I'm not an agriculturalist. My brother was a farmer, and so I love the land. But you have to grow the feedstuff that is used in factory farming on fields that are now overworked. Is that what you're saying?
The fields have been overworked, producing crops very often for intensive livestock. So we need to give up the intensive livestock and move to a grass-based system.
It's not that there are hundreds of thousands of cows and calves out there eating it. It's what is grown to feed them in their sheds.
Yes, we need to feed them on the right feed sustainably, but also we need to look at the feed for all these plant-based burgers, because as has just been said, and I very much agree with you, many of the plant fats that we're now relying on to replace the animal fats, which used to be much part of our diet, come from highly unsustainable systems like palm oil, genetically modified soy, almonds, and indeed coconut.
Sorry, almonds are bad. Why?
Because they're highly unsustainable, lots of pesticides, lots of water. The main almond production area is in California in the Central Valley, and it just can't go on like that. So are we switching our reliance on UK, for instance, UK-produced animal fats to plant fats produced intensively on the other side of the world? That can't be the solution.
Okay, this is the dichotomy, isn't it? You know, factory farming is bad, but if you go to organic farming, you still don't like the idea of that. However, if you want plant-based diets, then you're actually destroying the planet and your health as well, is one argument.
I think we're actually quite in agreement here. There are a huge number and a growing number of processed plant-based foods that people can replace animal foods with, but they are not a panacea. If you are buying highly processed...
Almonds, coconut oil, all of those things that have been mentioned, you throw those in there as well, and I'm going to check the ingredients, then they're doing as much harm as animals grazing, eating the land, eating...
I think it's difficult to say with any kind of absolute that it's doing as much harm. You'd have to look on a case-by-case basis. But I would argue that if you're buying plastic-wrapped, highly processed plant-based burgers that are being shipped from America, that is not the answer. It can be a small part of your diet, but it certainly shouldn't be the biggest part of your diet. You can't really look at these problems as tiny little issues. You kind of have to look at it as a holistic solution. You have to look at an overall UK land management plan. How are we going to use the land?
Well, you're talking about a perfect world, aren't you? And we will come back to that in just a moment. Benjamina, I'm going to ask you a question in a second, but I want to bring this one back to you. Meat. You've talked about all the things that are bad for you, or some of them anyway. Meat, good for you?
Well, I don't think you can categorise any food as being entirely good or entirely
That's
bad.
what my mum used to do.
Well, I mean, meat
Eat that up, greens are good
Easier
for
in
you.
those days.
It is, yeah. I mean, meat certainly is a source of important nutrients. So in the UK, for example, meat and meat products provide about a fifth of our iron, about a third of our zinc intake. So that's not to say that you can't get all the nutrients you need without eating meat, but if you are eating an entirely plant-based diet, you do need to balance that carefully to ensure that you're getting all the nutrients that you need. And we would say, I would agree that we need to look at things holistically. You know, healthy diets are not just about single products or single foods. It's about eating a balanced diet overall. And we would say that you don't have to cut meat out of your diet to have a healthy diet. Meat can be included in healthy diets, but it's about getting the right variety of meat and plant-based food.
OK, so what about, you talk about the UK, we are a rich society, relatively rich society here. What about in less developed countries, where either crops are scarce or meat is the easiest thing to raise because you can carry those goats around with you wherever you happen to be moving?
Well, typically in more developing countries, you see a move from when people have less resources, they tend to rely more heavily on staple foods, so say rice or wheat, for example. And then as countries get richer, which is what we're seeing now, they start to increase their consumption of animal products.
Benjamina, is lab-grown meat as opposed to plant-based diet? You can comment on both if you wish, but I know where your speciality. Is lab-grown meat the answer to the world's food problems and climate problems?
I don't think there is one answer. The way I see it is it will be a mixture of answers. And I think that's, you know, in the answers you've heard right now, it's evident. Like, it won't be just meat. It won't be just plant-based. It won't be just cell-based or cultivated meat. It will be a mixture of all these solutions. And different people will prefer different scenarios. And it's about finding, I guess, the right percentages of each that work for the planet and our health.
How can you be sure that it is good for you? Because, as we heard here from a nutritionist whose job it is to check out whether these things are right or are wrong, nobody knows yet what it could finally do to you.
I mean, we will go through novel food regulation, which are strict regulations that, you know, will prove that it is safe. And we, as a company, our job is to really prove that and show why every single point of our process is safe and why there's no reason this should harm you. So as a company, before anything gets to anyone's mouth, it will be tested by experts.
Yeah. How long before I can buy a lab-grown meat burger for the same price as I can get one from my local supermarket made of bits of cow?
So it depends which one in the supermarket, right? If you're comparing to organic meat prices, I would say 3-4 years. If you're talking about kind of the cheaper meat, it will be more 5 years plus.
OK. You've got a rival here, haven't you? Or is there a symbiosis?
Well, it's important to make the distinction between plant-based meat and lab meat. Obviously, plant-based meat is made from plants and is vegan. Lab meat...
And isn't meat.
And, well, what is meat? You know, this is a question we're all starting to ask. Beyond meat, which has been in the news a lot this year...
meat is muscle.
Well, meat is protein. They broke down meat. They took a piece of meat and they put it in an MRI scanner and they broke it down with the plan of rebuilding it from plants. So they saw that it had proteins and various different components, and they tried to rebuild it using those components from plants. So I think our whole idea...
Were they successful?
I believe they have made a good product. It's not a healthy product. It's maybe not... It's far more environmentally friendly than meat, but it's maybe not as good as legumes. But it's a very good product that they're still working on. And it's suitable for vegans. Lab meat is not suitable for vegans because it comes from cells.
Yeah. Tell me this one as well. Why would a vegan want to eat something called meat?
Well, lots of vegans aren't vegan because they don't like meat. They're vegan because they don't like animals being exploited and killed. Some vegans may absolutely love the taste of meat, and every day they might be desperately missing that taste. So they just want a transition food which has the flavours and the nutritional value that they recognise and remember, but doesn't have that other element of slaughter to it.
Okay, but it seems we can't live with it, we can't live without it.
Well, it's great that you're doing this, having this conversation, because we all need to be able to understand what the right thing to do is in terms of our future diets. And here's my very simple solution. Wherever you're watching this, we should align our future diets to the productive capacity of the sustainable and welfare-friendly farming systems which need to replace the ones we have at the moment. And that can be done all over the world. The diet will be different in different countries, but actually we can produce enough to feed a world peak population in a sustainable way. There's a lot of hope here, but we, the citizens, have to
you need to have
act.
some kind of international coordination.
Yes, we do.
For that, and
We
there,
need a-
there
we
are
need
other
a-
more pressing matters, some might argue.
No, because the future of agriculture is about climate change, it's about biodiversity, it's about food security. It's the most pressing issue of our time. So we need one of those Paris COP21 meetings for food, and we can all agree what the right way forward is. And I think there is a lot of agreement, actually, even within this panel, as to how we can go about that.
Okay, what do you think the way forward is going to be rather than should be?
Well, I think there's a win-win. I think there's a lot of changes we can make which benefit both health and the planet. And there's been an analysis done of our UK health eating guide, comparing it to what we currently eat in the UK, which is not particularly healthy, and moving to a diet that's more like that, had both a significant impact on our health outcomes, but also had a 32% lower impact on the environment in terms of land use, CO2 emissions, and water use. So I think there's a win-win here. If we can move towards healthier, more balanced diets, then that's better for us, better for our health, and better for the planet as well.
Okay, say whatever you want in just a moment, but I'm going to go and we've got about 5 minutes left, slightly less. So, Benjamina, normally we do this at the beginning of a programme. We ask somebody to describe how it works rather than what it might do in the end. But I'm going to come to you the other way around and say, take us through the process in a laboratory to creating that muscle-twitching piece of meat that one day I'm going to eat that's just been grown in a petri dish.
Sure. So it depends which type of cells that you're working with, but essentially you first take a cell sample. In our case, that's a pig. It can be a blood sample. It can be a small skin patch behind the ear. It's something non-invasive. Then in our case, we program these cells so that they can be expanded and be similar essentially to embryonic stem cell. So we expand them and we then differentiate them. So we push them to become muscle fat. And the same way as you eat every day, they have to eat every day. And so they grow in something called the media, which is basically the nutrition for the cells. And that's where, most people used to use fetal bovine serum, but today you can have fully synthetic.
And tell me, do you end up with something the size of a pig? It's obviously outgrown the petri dish or the laboratory, or do you have 100,000 of these eventually, each one of which is growing something the size and shape of a burger?
So you can do it in different ways. Essentially, what we're aiming for is bioreactors that can be various sizes. So we're looking at around maybe 10,000 liter bioreactors when we're at production scale. And so you're looking at around half of that, so maybe 5,000 kilos in it. So you can have it bigger than a pig, but you can also do it in a small petri dish. So you could do both, and different companies are doing different approaches.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much. Come back and tell us when you finally got... I know we don't have enough time to do the entire process, but you know what I'm going to say. This is Frankenfood, isn't it? It's been thrown out there before. This is monster, Frankenstein's monster food.
There are, just to reiterate, this is not vegan. However, in my opinion, there are huge advantages to doing this. There are massive problems we haven't spoken about yet when it comes to rearing animals for food, antibiotics.
So this is better than the alternative?
This is better than the alternative, in my opinion, yeah.
Frankenfood?
Well, I think the jury's out whether lab meat can ever be economically viable and environmentally viable. And meanwhile, there's a better way, which is that we can buy environmentally friendly and welfare friendly.
You're plugging your business, aren't you?
Not my business, no, it's my organisation and its mission to get our future farming systems aligned to the livable limits of planet Earth. And I think we will need sustainably managed livestock to do that. We actually can eat them with a clear conscience, knowing that we are part of the solution.
But our
as long as
generation
we can
hasn't got
differentiate.
that yet. Do you think the next generation has?
Yes, I think young people are asking all these questions, and the more debate there is, the better, because we need to know the answers about what's part of the solution and what's part of the problem, and know the difference in the marketplace.
Will you eat this lab-grown meat when it comes around?
I don't like to be ideological in my objections to things. Let's say I've got a healthy scepticism about it.
And Bridget, what about you? Nutritionist. You look to see what is good to put into your body, my body, anybody else's body. Would you eat this?
I think I'd have to see what the nutritional composition looked like.
But does it depend on the taste? Does it depend on the cost? Or does it just
Yeah,
depend on whether
absolutely.
it's good for you?
I think we know that people choose things based on taste and cost. So it has to taste good and it has to be at a price that people can afford. But I mean, I don't have any ideological objection to it. I think I'd like to see the nutritional composition and how it's produced.
Do you see a day when this is the answer, when the majority of our meat-based food comes from within a laboratory rather than from a green field out there?
I think that's really difficult to predict, but I think it's fair to say that we've got at our disposal now a whole wide range of different foods that we can use to build healthy diets. And for me, it's about the diet as a whole, not single foods.
All right, listen, thank you very much indeed. I know we only just touched the surface. Thank you very much, Benjamina, coming in at the last moment, we know, to replace your co-founder of the company who's not very well. Good luck. Come back and tell us more. Thank you very much, Maria. Appreciate all of your time. That is our dish of the day. From me, David Foster, the Roundtable team. We hope you found it interesting. We wait to see what the real taste is. One day, we'll have some here on the table. From me, goodbye.